Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Garrett Hake in Washington, where lawmakers have left behind a mostly empty Capitol as the southern border grows more overwhelmed by the day. Negotiations on a border security deal will continue virtually for the holiday season, but the reality on the ground is setting records. Homeland Security officials tell NBC News the number of apprehensions at the southern border topped 12,000 for 3 days straight this week. 10,000 of those migrants crossed illegally between official ports of entry. Those numbers are far beyond what the Department of Homeland Security facilities and personnel there are equipped to handle. A record 27,000 migrants are currently in DHS custody, and border officials say that their processing centers are operating at nearly 3 times their capacity. In a statement to NBC News today, the acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection called the surge a, quote, serious challenge, saying CBP needs more funds from Congress to address the illegal crossings. That comes as Texas Governor Greg Abbott escalated the political fight over the border, announcing that he sent a group of migrants to Chicago on a government-chartered flight for the first time. You're looking at footage from one of those flights released by the governor. It's Abbott's latest move protesting the White House border policies by sending migrants to cities run by Democrats. This comes after Abbott enacted a law earlier this week authorizing state law enforcement officers to arrest migrants who cross the border illegally. The White House condemned Abbott's move in a statement today, writing in part, Governor Abbott is not interested in solutions. He only seeks to use people as political pawns. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson sent a scathing letter to President Biden today saying that the nation was being, quote, overrun and urging him to use his executive authority to regain control of the situation. The intense criticism of Biden on the border issue is coming not just from elected Republicans, but also from the voters. According to a new poll from Quinnipiac, just 27% of voters approve of the president's handling of the situation at the border. It's his worst issue in this poll by far, in a poll where he struggles on virtually every major issue polled. NBC's Guad Venegas is near the southern border in Eagle Pass, Texas.
It's another day of an overwhelming surge here in Eagle Pass, where you can see the camp behind me, a field that has been used by Customs and Border Protection as an improvised zone, a waiting area for the migrants that have arrived, thousands here all week. We know now today that for 3 days in a row, DHS officials tell NBC News they've apprehended more than 12,000 migrants at the south border. You can see a lot of them sleeping, some standing around. You can see clothing that they've hung, presumably the clothes that they would have been wearing when they crossed the river. All throughout the day, again, we've been seeing large groups arrive after they cross from Mexico into the United States. And the lines, the long lines that they have to get into to eventually be moved over to another area where they are then taken on buses, and then they will eventually end up at a processing center. Now, today, we've also gotten more information about these processing centers. We now know that here in the Del Rio sector, which Eagle Pass belongs to, the processing centers are at 3 times capacity. That's why it's so difficult for Customs and Border Protection to move the migrants from here and take them to the processing centers. They are just overwhelmed with the numbers. And speaking to some of the migrants today, they tell me that there are groups in Mexico even larger than these. Most of the migrants that are arriving tell me that they come in groups of 500, 300, 400, and that even if Mexican immigration tries to stop them as they're making their way north, it's practically impossible because of the large number of migrants currently in Mexico attempting to reach the U.S.-Mexico border up here. So this is the situation today, another day, again, with the overwhelming number of migrants arriving. Back to you.
All right, that was Guad Venegas. Guad, thank you. And I'm joined now by 3 of my NBC News colleagues. Senior national politics reporter Natasha Korecki is in Chicago. Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley is with me on set to break down those new DHS numbers. And so is senior national political reporter Sahil Kapoor, who we rescued from the Hill to bring us the latest on the border negotiations. Natasha, I'll start with you. With Governor Abbott announcing he's flying these migrants to Chicago, what do we know about this charter flight?
Sure. So what we know is Tuesday evening, a flight from El Paso was chartered and it landed at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. And on that flight were approximately 100 migrants. It arrived without warning. There was reports from city officials that there were 2 individuals on that flight that flew with the migrants who fled the scene in an Uber as soon as they landed. And Later, Governor Abbott claimed responsibility for the flight, and it certainly is an escalation from his busing. And he did say that he was running into some impasses with the busing with Chicago, because Chicago started impounding these buses that were coming in and dropping off migrants. So he said he started flying them, and he's not going to stop anytime soon.
Something about the Uber part of it makes it feel a little bit more gimmicky despite the seriousness of this issue. Talk to me about the reaction from local officials, from state lawmakers. You've got 2 Democratic senators there in Illinois. I wonder how actions like this will affect them when it comes to eventually voting on some kind of border deal.
Well, certainly Democrats have been calling on Abbott to start coordinating with them. What they say is that they welcome migrants, but what's causing the issues is the lack of coordination, the dropping off of migrants in the middle of the night in the cold. We're now facing some pretty cold temperatures in Chicago, at the Willis Tower unannounced. And so there's been a practical clash on the ground of just where to house these migrants. And there's been a political clash. We've had the city alderman clashing with the mayor. We have the mayor's office clashing with the governor's office on funding, where to put these. We've had the governor's office calling on Biden to do more at the border, but also to do more so that to steer Governor Abbott and not give him so much control over where all these migrants are headed right now.
And just how stressed are Chicago's resources here? I mean, are they able to handle this? You said, I think, 100 people, a few hundred people. Are they able to handle this continued influx if this is the first of many such flights?
They have been struggling. It has been a struggle. There are a lot of conditions at the shelters that are under review right now. A 5-year-old boy died last year. That's been raising concerns. I'm sorry, last week he died. And they have been just overwhelmed. There are migrants sleeping in police stations and at Chicago's O'Hare Airport because they're getting dropped off without warning. They're trying to wrestle with where to place these. Also, there's been medical attention concerns. They're looking at their medical teams. They're trying to feed these people. They're trying to clothe these people, keep them warm in the cold. And there was also this big environmental issue here in Chicago where the state halted the construction of a new shelter by Chicago. So lots of problems.
Yeah, all right. Natasha Korecki, thank you for that reporting. And Julia, these are the problems we're talking about with a few hundred people. We're now dealing with tens of thousands over the last couple days on the border. You've been covering this issue for a long time. What is driving this spike right now? How unprecedented is what we're seeing at the border?
It's definitely unprecedented. I mean, we hit a record on Monday, and then we've stayed at that record for the past few days. So we continue to see unprecedented numbers. You saw what Gwad was stating there. I've been stating there myself, and I've never seen them build that tape like that. And when I talk to people about what's happening in Eagle Pass, also in Arizona, which is the other hot spot where I was last week, talk to agents there, what's driving this? And it could be a number of things. One is some migrants think that maybe it's better to get in now in case there's a future Trump administration and there's a crackdown on border policies. Also, cartels are just getting incredibly gutsy and sending people up here on trains and in huge groups to overwhelm Border Patrol and to take over the system, where they used to try to send as many as could possibly be processed at once. And there was sort of thought that 10,000 was the most that cartels could move and that CBP could process. They've blown past that now.
And who are the folks who are coming now? Is this driven by a specific country or region? Are we seeing people from all over the world come? And what's going on?
Definitely all over the world, but the top 2 countries remain Mexico and Venezuela. Now, Mexicans can be sent back into Mexico very easily. It's different than other people who come here and could go through the asylum process, but Venezuelans can't be returned. So even with what we're talking about on the Hill, and I know Sahil will weigh in on that, when you talk about mandatory detention or deporting everybody, if you can't deport Venezuelans and they're one of the #1 countries coming in here, it puts CBP in a real bind. And that's why we saw the commissioner today ask for more money, because they are so overwhelmed, they're starting to release migrants on the streets.
So, Sahil, how much additional pressure does the situation on the ground put on the negotiators who've been at this for a while but are now going to be at this virtually, at least for the next couple of days?
Huge. I mean, every time this is salient in the news, this is kind of eating up the headlines. It's more pressure on Congress to act and do something. Ultimately, this comes down to them. You know, it's not state officials, it's not city officials that have power to deal with immigration. They're dealing with pretty bad cards that they're trying to play with, pretty bad cards that they've been dealt. And of course, we know that the negotiators left yesterday. They're going to be picking this up virtually starting today through the rest of the holidays. The various negotiators, that includes Kiersten Sinema, the Arizona Independent, Chris Murphy and James Langford, all sound very positive about the need to get this done. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, the majority leader, wants to do it. Mitch McConnell wants a deal. They all want a deal. They have not been able to resolve this issue for the last 30 years. We'll see where this goes. I'm not expecting white smoke on a deal over the holidays because they usually like to get other members read in. But early when they come back, they're really going to be up against it given these other deadlines that they have to face.
The Abbott thing, given the scale of what we're talking about, does feel like a stunt, but it tells us something about at least how some Republicans are looking at this, right? It's a finger in the eye of the rest of the country, like, hey, this is now your problem too. How do you see the politics of some of these, border state Republican governors? I would put Ron DeSantis in that category too in Florida, kind of playing in the negotiations. This isn't a bunch of congenial senators who are going to strike a deal that's just going to fly through. Like, this is the constituency that's going to have to be on board with something they put together.
Absolutely. We've seen immigration politics nationally shift just massively to the right from a decade ago when there was that so-called Gang of Eight bill. Democrats were on offense. They just won an election overwhelmingly with Latino voters, and the consensus that came out of it, which now looks pretty wrong, was that you need to have a more liberal immigration system to win over Latino voters. Now Republicans are on offense. Not only these governors, but also House members. Speaker Johnson and his hardliners say nothing less than the more aggressive H.R. 2 bill. Anything less should be killed. Unclear whether these Senate negotiations even have a place in the House if they were to reach a deal. But what they're talking about expedited removal, expanding that at least to the border to turn away asylum seekers, not to the interior. Democrats say that's a red line because, as Julia was just talking about, a potential future Trump administration, they worry about how they could use that. Discretionary powers for a president to close the border, they worry about how a Donald Trump would use that, even though they're not worried about how Joe Biden would use that. One issue that's not on the table in these negotiations, DACA and the Dreamers, one of the biggest priorities of Democrats, gone.
Yeah, I mean, with these numbers, it's not hard to understand why that would be politically challenging. Talk a little bit about this Mike Johnson letter. Other than the politics of it, the point of it is to suggest that Biden could be doing more right now. Is there any indication that the White House is considering any more unilateral actions? Silo or Julia, if you're reporting on that too, I'd be interested in what either of you might know about that.
I think they're waiting on the deal for Congress, before they figure out any major steps to take. But Mike Johnson, I made a list here. He has a lot of things that he wants President Biden to do: end catch and release, end parole on any kind of scale, only use it for rare humanitarian individual cases, reinstate remain in Mexico, expand expedited removal to deport people who can't show asylum before the hearing, and build the wall. Now, some of these things, parole and expedited removal, are part of the negotiations. Mike Johnson putting this in a letter saying, Biden, you can do this by yourself, that's an interesting little signal.
Canny, Willie?
Well, I mean, a big part of this is logistics. A lot of the things you mentioned there, when I talk to people in DHS who'd have to carry this out, say there's no way, again, because you can't deport Venezuelans, because Mexico has to be on board with putting back remain in Mexico. If we're going to start turning people back, it's up to the Mexican government to see how many of those migrants they can absorb into their northern border cities. And so that's a big reason why Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas is sitting in these rooms right now. They're clear he's not negotiating on the part of the Biden administration, but he's there to talk about what is feasible and what's not. And the last thing I'd just like to point out is, even if this deal blows up, what's the inaction here that's really mattering is the funding. Because as they continue, these Republicans won't give a dime to the Biden border security effort. And as things get worse, they're just watching the system implode on itself.
That's the one thing everyone agrees on, the funding. The question is, how much is enough for Republicans? When can they get to yes and say, we'll give the funding, XYZ policies are enough?
Well, we'll keep watching it, and I appreciate the reporting from both of you guys. It's a complicated issue. We probably need to get some Mexican officials on that Zoom call that the negotiators are having, too. All right, guys, up next, an issue that could help decide the next election in a place that could help decide the next election. It's the economy, and it's the deciders. That's next. Plus, even with low unemployment and rising wages, many Americans are going hungry this holiday season. We'll explain why. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. It has been a roller coaster economic year. Historically large bank failures, an epic battle against inflation, labor strikes, job gains, big stock market swings. But the economy appears to be closing out 2023 on a high note, knock on wood. The Conference Board reporting yesterday that the consumer confidence is rising heading into 2024. It came on the same day President Biden touted his economic record during a trip to battleground Wisconsin.
When you increase the middle class, the poor have a shot and the wealthy still do very well. The middle class does well and we all do well. That's what we call Bidenomics. This. By the way, so far, we've created 14 million new jobs, more jobs in 3 years than any president's created in 4 years in history.
Despite those job numbers, the rise in consumer confidence and the cooling of inflation, just a third of Americans approve of the president's handling of the economy, according to the latest CNBC All-America Economic Survey. And in places like Erie County, Pennsylvania, one of the key counties in 2024 that NBC News has declared a decider in next year's elections, voters are not happy with the current economic climate. Correspondent Dasha Burns joins me now from Erie, Pennsylvania. And Dasha, why did we choose Erie County in the first place for our deciders?
Oh, look, Garrett, Erie is a swing county in a battleground state, and we know from history that the way Erie goes tends to be the way that Pennsylvania goes, and you well know the way that Pennsylvania goes tends to be the way that the nation goes when it comes to presidential elections. And this is a county that is largely a microcosm of the country. You've got a liberal city center and a more conservative ex-urban rural area. This used to be a manufacturing hub that's transitioning to more white-collar jobs with a hospital system and an insurance company that's moving in to become the bigger employer here. That's causing some tensions. We see some worker strikes over the summer. So a lot to dig into here that's going to really be reflective of some of the big storylines we're following nationally over the course of the election year, Garrett.
So why do the voters there feel like the economy is in bad shape? Is this all about inflation and prices?
Well, so this is what's so interesting, right? Because so many of the economic indicators and what the White House has been trying to message and trying to tout is that, look, the economy is on the up and up. We've avoided this recession that everyone was worried was going to happen, that inflation is easing, wages are rising, the markets are doing well. But when you get on the ground and you talk to people, that's just not hitting home. Take a listen. Who feels good about the economy right now? Who feels bad about the economy right now? All right, Shelley, let me ask you first. What do you think is going on economically? What are the challenges you're facing economically?
I would think it would be groceries, gas, everything you have to buy every day is way more expensive than previous years.
Let me ask you this. Right now, when you look on paper, right, you've got low unemployment rates, wages are up, inflation is easing, stock market's doing well, but are you feeling any of that? How do you feel about the economy day to day?
I'm not sure I agree with what you just said.
Not better off now than I was 4 years ago. I retired 3 years ago. I never planned on using some of the money that I saved to retire that I had to use because of the economy now. So I don't know if the stock market's up, I must be in the wrong place because I'm not making the same money that I was making before.
And look, Garrett, some Democrats say to me, this isn't fair to Biden. He should be getting more credit. But the reality is this is what you're finding across the board. He's got a 33% approval rating on the economy, according to the latest CNBC poll. And in a place like Erie, where he really narrowly won this county in 2020, largely because of Democratic turnout, when you've got even Democrats saying, hey, the guy that I voted for hasn't delivered, whether you think that's fair or not, that's the reality that the Biden campaign is facing. And they've got a lot of work to do if they want to be able to win a place like this. It's going to be so critical in this election, Garrett.
All right, Dasha Burns for our Deciders series from a very festive bar in Erie County, Pennsylvania. Dasha, thank you.
Thanks. Happy holidays.
And we just heard from folks in Pennsylvania who say they're feeling the pain of inflation on things like food prices. Now, NBC News senior policy reporter Shannon Pettypiece joins me from a food pantry here in Washington, which has seen a 16% increase in recipients over the last year. So, Shannon, if the economy is showing these signs of strength that we laid out, why are places like that food pantry so busy right now?
Well, in a word, inflation. That's what organizations and nonprofit executives tell me they're hearing from their recipients. I mean, these are just some of the hundreds of bags that are going to be going out to people just days before Christmas. This organization I'm at, they focus on meals for people who have an illness or a disease, many people who can't work because they, are disabled. Those people are dependent on organizations like this for their food, and they're continuing to see growing demand. They'll give out about 2 million meals this year. That is double what they were giving out before the pandemic. And I talked to the executive director of this organization a bit about that. Here's what she had to say.
The folks that we're taking care of are really not well enough to work. They can't take advantage of those jobs that have the higher salaries now, but they are experiencing the inflation and the increased food costs, and they're not well enough to cook and shop on their own. Even if, you are receiving SNAP, those dollars aren't going as far as they used to.
So, even though we hear about inflation slowing, food prices are still about 25% higher than they were before the pandemic. So whether someone's making more money or they're on a fixed income like Social Security or disability benefits, they just say that those increasing benefits or wages aren't enough to offset this increasing cost in the food that they've been seeing.
So, Shannon, as our policy reporter, is there anything in the policy pipeline that might address those food costs specifically or help move people off these SNAP benefits, be able to, get people to, close the gap here on food prices?
Well, I mean, of course, one of the first tasks for members of Congress when they get back to Washington is going to be setting a new budget. There's a number of proposals out there by congressional Republicans that would further restrict food benefits. Democrats obviously would like to see a return of some of these COVID-era benefits. Neither side really has the power or the votes to be able to get one of those through. So it's potentially going to be a mashup between the two sides. But one thing groups warn is that even if there is a slight increase in benefits, like for housing assistance or for food stamp benefits, those increases just aren't keeping up with the increase in demand. So there is widespread concern that even budget increases won't be enough to meet the need that's out there right now.
All right, Shannon Pettypiece, thank you for that reporting. And up next, we are learning more about the timeline for President Trump's legal team to challenge the Colorado Supreme Court ruling. We have that new reporting ahead. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The clock is ticking now for former President Trump's legal team to challenge the Colorado Supreme Court ruling that bars him from the state's Republican primary for violating the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause. And it will continue to tick perhaps into the new year. A source with knowledge of the Trump team's legal planning tells NBC News it will wait until after the holidays to file its appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. The deadline for that appeal is January 4th. And the moment the appeal is filed, the Colorado ruling will be stayed, meaning Trump will be on the ballot in Colorado, at least for the time being. NBC's Vaughn Hillyard is here to help us make sense of all that. So, Vaughn, walk us through your new reporting on this ruling. What exactly should we expect from Trump's legal team, and how does the timing here work to their advantage?
Right, Garrett. I'm told that the legal team is preparing to put forward their filing to the U.S. Supreme Court, their appeal formally after the Christmas holiday, most likely sometime next week, but before January 4th. For this team, this legal team, this is, let's be very clear, Garrett, a very important appeal, because the ramifications of whether the Supreme Court were to take this up or not are very high. And in this scenario, the Supreme Court does take this appeal. They are going to be determining whether Donald Trump is disqualified from the ballot, not only in Colorado, but the expectation is that that would amount to disqualification from the ballots across the rest of the country, upending this 2024 process here. And so, of course, the complexities of exactly who this legal team are still up in the air. He had a Colorado lawyer that worked and represented him on the in front of the Colorado Supreme Court. But for Donald Trump and his legal team, they have their focus in many different places right now here, and going before the U.S. Supreme Court to determine disqualification is perhaps the highest among them.
Well, if his legal team's not loving this moment, his political team seems to be. They're fundraising off of it. It's sort of more armor for him in the primary. Talk about the difference there in terms of how the campaign team is seizing on this.
Right. As we have seen from each of the indictments that Donald Trump has had issued against him, to the execution of the search warrant of Mar-a-Lago by the FBI back in August of 2022, his political team has tried to make the most of what are difficult legal circumstances, and this is no different. His campaign has sent out multiple emails over the last almost 48 hours now, suggesting that this is an effort by politicized justices and a politicized justice system to, in Donald Trump's words, nullify the will of Republican voters around the country. Of course, we will wait from the Supreme Court to make the ultimate decision about whether Donald Trump remains on the ballot or not.
And the man who once spanned those teams is Rudy Giuliani, who declared bankruptcy today. What can you tell us about that, Vaughn?
Right. This followed an order from the court just yesterday saying that Rudy Giuliani must comply and must begin to compensate these two Fulton County election workers immediately. The assets that have been filed that Rudy Giuliani currently has is somewhere between $1 million to $10 million. Obviously, that is a far cry from the nearly $150 million penalty that was put on him here just earlier this week. But so for Rudy Giuliani, filing bankruptcy, per his spokesman, was the understandable first step towards beginning to pay up that compensation. But for Rudy Giuliani, of course, this is going to be a difficult time ahead here as he looks to begin to how he can actually begin to pay off what he is owed here at the stage in his career.
All right, Vaughn Hillyard, thank you. And staying on the campaign trail, where for the second time in a week, we've now gotten a poll out of New Hampshire that has former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley all alone in second place. Haley has jumped to 30% and trails former President Trump by 14 points among likely voters, according to a new St. Anselm College poll. She's gained 15 points in that poll since September. That jives with a CBS poll from earlier this week that also had her rising in New Hampshire and trailing by 15 points. So what does this mean? Well, for starters, it's proof of some real momentum for Haley. She appears to have broken out of the pack in New Hampshire on the strength of some well-reviewed debate performances and a high-profile endorsement from that state's Republican governor. But it's also a sobering reminder of Donald Trump's power. Despite all this, he's still up by double digits in New Hampshire, and he maintains a commanding lead in Iowa and in the national primary polls. Joining me now on set is Benji Sarlin, Washington Bureau Chief for Semaphore, former Maryland Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards, and Jim Garrity, Senior Political Correspondent for the National Review. So, Benji, these polls don't seem to be a fluke. They've got Nikki Haley in second place. Those of us in the political media jump on it, but how much should we read into something like that?
So to the extent Nikki Haley has a chance at the nomination, this is exactly what it looks like. And we've always known this is what it would look like. If Donald Trump is the Death Star, then New Hampshire is sort of the thermal exhaust port you can fire one missile into and hope to start a chain reaction. And that it is kind of uniquely suited for a challenger like her. It has tend to be a more secular, moderate electorate. It has a lot of independents who cross over historically. There seems to be room for Haley to grow because Chris Christie is still sitting on a significant well of support. And the hope is that even though Trump is up by more than 50 points in some national polls this week, I mean, like absurd numbers, there is a history of wild swings if someone can win an early state. And the hope is that once soft Trump supporters start tuning in, they start realize this is a real race, maybe they look at things differently. Now, how likely is that? That's another story. And for starters, we have a story today on Semaphore. Nikki Haley's own home state of South Carolina, which comes 1 month later, is very Trumpy. And there's no sign of weakness right there.
We'll talk more about South Carolina in a minute, but many Bothans died to bring us these battle plans. So, Jim, I'll give you a crack at this, too. There seems to be a challenge here because Donald Trump's floor is pretty high in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley's ceiling might not be high enough to surpass it. You know, can she climb over that line to be above his floor? How do you view it?
Well, first of all, it would be really good for her if Chris Christie could be frozen in carbonite.
There you go. There you go. We're going to see how far we can keep
because, like,
going.
in polls, Chris Christie's running a one-state campaign, right? He's getting maybe 10, 12 percentage points pretty consistently in New Hampshire polls. If he were to go out and say, I'm out, and either he endorses Nikki Haley. Look, the Christie's campaign is all about, I can't stand Trump. Trump stinks. Trump's a threat to the republic. You know, this is, you know, it's very easy to see his voters going over to Nikki Haley, less so Ron DeSantis. And who knows, maybe after Iowa, Ron DeSantis is going to look like a dead man walking in the sense of, you know, he's not looking great now. He's been endorsed by the governor. He's done the full Grassley. He's done the 99. None of this seems to be helping. He is still well behind in Iowa. So it may be a two-person race by the time it gets to New Hampshire. And if you're not Trump, Maybe Nikki Haley's the only game in town.
And Chris Christie knows how to drop out in New Hampshire and support a candidate. We've seen that before. Donna, we're closing in on this right now, and I think because of this Colorado ruling, you have this dynamic where these other Republicans are still defending Donald Trump. You wouldn't run a race like that. How do you come at a guy who you're still having to actively defend, even if it's, only on procedural grounds?
Well, this is the problem, I think, that the Republican field has saved Chris Christie. He has been willing to go at Trump like he's running for first place. Everybody else is running for second place. And guess what? Nobody ever covers who comes in second place. And so I think that this is really difficult. This is yet again another example where there's an opening to go after Trump, and these candidates have taken a pass on that. It makes it really hard to beat the guy in first place if you're never going to attack him.
Benji, you started to go down this road. South Carolina now is not necessarily Nikki Haley's South Carolina anymore. Let's, for the sake of running this experiment, say she does either win or come in a strong second in New Hampshire. What's greeting her politically back home in South Carolina?
Well, for starters, just about every relevant elected official in the state, save for Tim Scott, and we'll see what happens with him, is endorsing Trump. The governor, Henry McMaster, the very first Trump endorsement in 2016, very eager to keep that title this cycle as well. And in polling, he does not seem to have an obvious weakness. I mean, he's over 50%, and unlike New Hampshire mentioned, there's not some obvious remaining pool of moderates who will naturally accrue. Now, when our reporters have talked to the Haley campaign about this, they think that there still is an opportunity, that voters are familiar with her, even though it's been quite a while since she ran in the state, and that will come in handy, be an asset when they actively are looking at this race as a two-person race, ideally in that situation, and they think they can pull off an upset potentially that way. But if there's a weakness now, though, it is not evident in the polls.
Donna, South Carolina has a history of some pretty dirty pool when it comes to Republican primary races and in politics, I think in general, I think that's fair to say. If this is close and it's Trump and a woman of color in South Carolina, what are we looking at this cycle?
Well, look, first of all, I think that the South Carolina that Nikki Haley ran in is not today's South Carolina. It's a completely different electorate, and it's pretty dug in for Donald Trump. And so I don't know that those attributes that Nikki Haley likes to tout nationally really come into play in South Carolina. It doesn't seem to me that she's going to be able to run on the woman of color thing in a state like South Carolina.
Jim, we like to have these conversations, but Trump is so far ahead nationally. We've run out of, in my mind, like other X factors, other court cases, other things that could kind of swoop in and change the race. We talk about it a lot amongst ourselves as reporters. Is there anything short of a major health scare for Donald Trump or something like that that could fundamentally change what's been the direction of this race since April? Yeah,
the Nikki Haley theory of the case is that, I'm going to veer from Star Wars to 300. The God King bleeds, right? Once you see Donald Trump get beaten in a contest.
He can be beaten.
All of a sudden, he doesn't look so powerful. All of a sudden, he doesn't look like this juggernaut that is unstoppable. And the idea is that Republican primary voters would say, we have a choice. We don't have to go with Trump. He's not inevitable. We can consider our options. I think most Republicans already know that. They've had a menu of options going back the entire year. And roughly half the party, state polls, national polls, keep saying, nope, we want Trump. Oh, he's indicted? Nope, we want Trump. Oh, this happened in the news cycle? Oh, we want Trump. They're not all that easily persuaded away from this stuff. So I see why, if you're running for president against Trump, you need to have some theory in which this thing shakes out the way you want, but it's not looking like something has to change the next month for this to come to fruition.
To underscore how deeply into the upside down we are, to add yet another nerdy reference to this conversation, I want to play something Ron DeSantis told the 700 Club this week when asked if he had any regrets about this primary.
If I could have one thing change, I wish Trump hadn't been indicted on any of this stuff. I also think it distorted the primary, and I think it's been that those have kind of been the main issues that have happened.
Because it's helped him, is that what you're saying? And so therefore
it's both that, but then it also has just crowded out, I think, so much other stuff, and it's sucked out a lot of oxygen.
My biggest regret is that my opponent got indicted. What are we dealing with here?
Well, first of all, it's fascinating we're already getting into the campaign obit phase. I see we're not the only ones who have a Word doc open somewhere writing up a Ron DeSantis obit. Ron DeSantis has one. But also, it's fascinating he picked something that he had no control over. I mean, this is a campaign that I don't think anyone has said has gone well, literally from day one on any level. Maybe you could have prepared for these indictments that everyone knew were coming and come up with some message or some way to lay the groundwork, anything. All they've seemed to do is run from them. They've never seemed to find an effective response to go against Trump.
Donna, it seems to me if you're taking questions about your regrets as a candidate, you're probably already thinking that you might be done being a candidate pretty soon.
Pretty much done. I mean, I think one of the other problems for Ron DeSantis is that he never really did anything to separate himself from Donald Trump. And so he didn't give even Trump voters or those in the middle a reason to vote for him. And lastly, I think that Ron DeSantis has not been willing to take his own responsibility for the demise of his campaign. He's done so many things wrong that it's not surprising that Nikki Haley is the one who benefits from DeSantis' deep slide.
The indictments weren't under my control. Right. My super PAC wasn't under my control. And you're not going to get a lot of sympathy for that. Guys, we have to leave it there. Benji, Jim, Donna, thank you for tolerating our super nerdy sci-fi packed reference panel here. But anyway, we got to leave it there. Still ahead, the latest on the Israel-Hamas war and why ceasefire and hostage talks seem to be stalled. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The fighting continues in the Israel-Hamas war as the World Health Organization warns that only 9 hospitals in Gaza are even partially operational, all of them in the south. Disease, thirst, and hunger are taking hold, with nearly 1.9 million people in Gaza internally displaced. And a UN report says more than 500,000 people in Gaza are facing starvation.
There is not enough food. Every single person I speak to, everywhere I go in Gaza, is hungry. The time is now. We are dealing with starving people now, adults, children, and it's unbearable.
The UN is set to vote on a resolution on enhancing humanitarian aid in a bid to pressure Israel to agree to another military pause. That vote had been delayed twice amid a debate over who would inspect aid trucks entering Gaza. Meanwhile, the aerial bombardment continues. Israeli airstrikes struck near a hospital in Rafah, near the southern border with Egypt yesterday. A Sky News team filming nearby captured the strike and the aftermath as people raced to aid the injured. Many displaced Palestinians have fled to Rafah looking for safety. Speaking with my colleague Andrea Mitchell, who will join us in just a moment, a senior Netanyahu advisor said the strike that Sky captured was a, quote, surgical one aimed at a high-ranking Hamas official. This all comes as efforts to secure the release of more hostages continue. 129 hostages are thought to be in Gaza. 21 are believed to be dead. And today, Hamas rejected any deal or talks until Israel stops its military campaign. This even as Hamas launched another barrage of missiles toward Israel this morning. Yesterday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken laid the blame squarely on Hamas for the current lack of progress on a hostage deal.
The problem was and has been and remains Hamas. They reneged on commitments that they made during the first pause for hostage releases. And the question is whether they are, in fact, willing to resume this effort. But certainly it's something that we would welcome. I know that Israel would welcome. And I think the world would welcome.
Joining me now on set is NBC Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell. So, Andrea, what is the latest on these talks, if we can even call them that, between Israel and Hamas to have some kind of new pause, new exchange?
Well, the talks now at the UN are between the U.S. and Egypt over whether Israel or the United Nations will inspect the cargo going in through the Rafah crossing and now the second crossing that's open, which is directly from Israel in. The issue is who is better able to look for smuggled weapons and all kinds of other goods that could get in and contribute to the war effort. And the other problem that is also not being described as accurately is, from my sources, what to do once the aid gets in. How does it get to where it needs to really get? That's one of the problems that the U.S. officials are having. I mean, the U.S. has been really the primary mover, starting with Tony Blinken, a month and a half ago, just to get Rafah open and to get aid in, and it's still a trickle, and it's not nearly what they need, and it's a disaster.
And that's just on aid. I mean, is there anything active with the Qataris or anyone else on another pause for hostages?
There's a lot of activity, nothing imminent. The issue there is Hamas most recently, today, said that they were objecting to an Israeli proposal for a 7-day proposed pause to get more aid in and more hostages out. Primarily, they're focusing on the women, the older men. But we've been hearing this for days, and the talks are on, off. They're not dead. They're still actively engaged, pressure on both sides to get this done. But, of course, Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire, and the U.S. position and the Israeli position is that that would be, laying down their weapons while Hamas still is an armed military force living right there next to Israel.
But the U.S. and Israel are increasingly isolated at the UN and internationally for that position. How much are U.S. officials concerned about what that isolation might mean in the longer term?
Very. I mean, Garrett, this is really critical because repeatedly the U.S. has twice vetoed resolutions. Once the veto, the others, they had some other support for it. But with the U.S., the only veto last week on that resolution, I think it was Friday night, all week they've been trying. It was actually 3 times they were supposed to go to the floor with a resolution. You know this from covering Congress until it's written and they know that everybody signed off on it. They're not going to go and call the vote again. The U.S. does not want to be isolated like that again. And so they're seen as the only defender of Israel. Even the UK abstained last time rather than joining the veto. But Europe is really siding against Israel in this. And it's because of the devastation, the horror of an estimated more than 20,000 dead. And the president and Tony Blinken, Defense Secretary Austin, they've all said very clearly, Jake Sullivan was in Israel last week, they've all said very clearly that there are too many casualties, that Israel is not targeting well enough, and that privately they'll say that they are not seeing signs yet that Israel is really trying to limit civilian casualties. Israel, as you heard Mark Reviv tell me, they say they are.
Last question. Domestically, what does Netanyahu's political position look like there? The deaths of those hostages who had escaped seems to have had a major impact in Israel.
They had escaped for 5 days, so it was not only, and that was tragically, friendly fire. This made it even worse. They had actually escaped from their captors, but then were killed by Israeli forces. It's terrible. It's perilous. I mean, his popularity is really plummeted, but, and this is the big but, the horrors of October 7th are still raw with the Israeli public on all sides of the political equation. So they were vastly, damaged by what happened before October 7th, by all the political infighting over his trying to take over the judiciary. That division led to their vulnerability. Most people believe on October 7th they let their guard down. But since then, he's blamed for October 7th. He's blamed for the hostage taking. And they all still want to defeat Hamas. So they're united against Hamas in support of the war. The hostage families want a ceasefire. They want to get their people home. But aside from that, the populace really are not yet ready to change horses in the middle of a war.
It's a fascinating dynamic. Angela, we're glad to have your expertise to lean on that. And up next, revolution and regulation, or the lack thereof, as AI races forward. Where do Congress and the tech industry stand on getting meaningful guardrails in place? That's next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. 2023 may very well go down as the year of artificial intelligence, or AI. It was at the heart of the actors and writer strikes in Hollywood and gave rise to a once little-known company called OpenAI and its bot ChatGPT. Its explosive growth also unleashed a series of cataclysmic warnings from some experts and tech gurus. Despite AI's growing presence in our daily lives, there's still little consensus here in the United States on how to regulate the technology. The European Union, meanwhile, has taken steps to address the issue, agreeing earlier this month on landmark rules aimed at limiting the use of artificial intelligence. Joining me now is Kiersten Todt, former chief of staff at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. So, Kiersten, we're about a year in since ChatGPT exploded on the scene. Do we culturally, sort of systematically in the government have any better handle on this issue really than we did a year ago?
Well, what's interesting is that artificial intelligence has really been used by companies, by government for quite a while. But to your point, it really became the center square on everybody's bingo card last November when we started seeing it in the consumer space with ChatGPT, having it used by regular people. But we know, and we've always talked about, that artificial intelligence is only as good as the data that goes into it. So when we're thinking about the future, one of the key pieces right now is understanding data provenance. And right now, there are no industry-wide methods that look at how we can see the trustworthiness of data based on how it was sourced. And sourcing implies the generation of the data, the compilation, the collection. But we are seeing a group of cross-sector CEOs come together to draft a set of data provenance standards. We're seeing some legislation as well.
I'll stop you there, because what does that mean? Is that just the input? Is that like not dumping Wikipedia into your chatbot? I mean, talk to me, be more specific about what that means.
It's understanding, so where does your data actually come from? How is it sourced? Where was it generated? We have to understand when it was compiled. What are the privacy standards around it? And obviously, this is a bit of a boil the ocean. So this first group of cross-sector CEOs, what they've come together are 9 issues to start looking at that. It's a draft set, but it's a starting point. And more importantly, it says the first piece to understanding how we're managing AI for the future is to understand what's the data that's going into the AI.
Chuck Schumer in the Senate has been very interested in this and trying to get senators up to speed. But as somebody who covers Congress, I worry that it's going to end up being like social media was, where it was a bunch of grandpas basically having to get this explained to them by their kids. Is our government up to the task of regulating AI, of understanding what we're dealing with?
Well, we certainly saw that with the release of President Biden's executive order this fall in November. And one of the key pieces, one of the key elements, the catalyst for that was to get out in front of this. So we, in fact, aren't in a situation like we were with social media, where we're responding to a concept of move fast and break things and first to market over secure to market. What we also have seen is the EU in their AI Act. And EU is also the first mover, the global standard setter. And that's really come out with some very strong movements to look at the riskiest uses of AI and how to regulate those when we use it for law enforcement, using it for critical infrastructure systems, for hiring and for education.
What does the U.S. government make of the EU's plan? Is that a roadmap for us? Do we like what they've done?
I think it's always a roadmap, and then we're always going to look to modify. But one of the key elements to the AI EU Act, what they've done there, has been to look at companies that pose the greatest risk to individual and societies, like in hiring, using AI for hiring or education. It's saying that those companies have to provide regulators with proof of risk assessment, with assurance that the data that's going into the AI is not going to cause potential harm, such as perpetuating racial bias.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit. Why do we see those as the biggest risks here? Why are companies like that the biggest risks?
Because right now, those are the ones that can impact how we're actually building our society. If we're using AI for hiring and that data has racial bias in it, if that data has other elements, to the point about data sourcing, where we don't know where it came from, then we're only going to exponentially exacerbate the challenges that we already have.
If those are the cultural and societal risks, what are the national security risks? What are the folks across the river at the Pentagon concerned about?
It's a great question, because right now we have to be really careful that we don't let the developers of AI write the future. It's sort of like having a company be both the ref and the player. You can't do that. It's not to say that they shouldn't be at the table, but we have to ensure that there's a cross-sector group of leaders, both in industry as well as government, writing the regulation for the future. And we also have to see that secure innovation is not an oxymoron. The future of AI is very much about building innovation with security, and we don't have to see those two concepts in tension with one another.
Well, then let's try to end this on a positive note. Where do you see the biggest opportunities here? Where do you see AI potentially changing the world in a positive way as we turn to a new year?
Well, the good news is that we're ahead of it. We understand the potential, we understand the opportunities, but we also understand the risks. And so again, this concept of secure innovation, building security into AI, but industry and government working together. And this isn't just a U.S. issue, it's not just a national issue, but we're seeing great strides in the U.S. engagement with international partners, like-minded economic nations, to come together to say, what should these global standards look like, and to get ahead of it and to build a more secure and resilient future that's grounded in innovation.
It's fascinating stuff. Kiersten Todt, thank you for coming in and talking about it with us. And thank you all for being with us this hour. NBC News Now coverage continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.